Get ready to find your recipe for a successful real estate lifestyle from America's top expert here at Greenlight REI with your host, Lance Edwards.
Well, hello everyone. Hi, this is Lance Edwards, and welcome to this edition of Lance Live and Greenlight REI. We are indeed live, and we got a special guest I'm going to introduce here in a moment. Lance Live show initiating here, and which means you're going to be able to submit questions on our topic today, which has to do about lease options, which you are going to find fascinating because we have with us one of the experts in lease option, Mr. John Jackson. So, John, welcome to Greenlight REI.
Hey, Lance, hey, thank you so much for having me. And I want to remind everybody that tomorrow is a national holiday because it is my birthday. And so we should all celebrate and rejoice the birth of me.
Yes, that's right. Let's all make a note of that, please. And, well, John, listen, nobody knows more about John Jackson than John Jackson, but real quick, give us your background and as it relates to real estate.
Yeah, you bet. So I started in real estate in 2003. I actually started with lease options and have done, for the most part, lease options ever since then. So that is 2019. So I'm coming up on 17 years, believe it or not, in real estate. And although I've done some wholesale deals here and there, almost exclusively lease options, and most of them I've done here in Texas, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I've done this since 2003. I started Leasing To Buy in 2003. That's the name of my company. And have done, it's well over 650 transactions. Again, almost all of them were lease options. And we work with pretty houses. So I know Ronald Grant talks about being in the pretty house business. That's what I'm in, the pretty house business. So I don't really like to deal with ugly houses. I deal with nice, pretty move-in ready houses. And typically the houses we work with are $225,000, $250,000 and above. And that's what I do. So that's the 30-second spiel on me.
and John, are you doing it full-time or part-time?
Oh my gosh, full-time. I do real estate full-time when I'm not doing actual real estate. Of course, I've got the education, the speaking side as well, just as you do as well. And so between real estate and the speaking and education side, that takes up my time. So I don't even have time to watch Netflix. So there you go.
All right. Okay. All right. So So thank you for that. So let's start real basic because we have people listening today. Some of them may be new to real estate, some of them intermediate, advanced. So let's start ground level basics. First of all, what is a lease option? What does that mean? Lease option.
Sure. Well, lease option is just like what it sounds like. It's a lease with a separate option to purchase. And so with lease options are actually used in all aspects of real estate. So, for example, Lance, I know you're one of the nation's premier experts on commercial real estate. Lease options have actually got their start in commercial real estate, where maybe someone would lease a property, but they had the option to buy, say, that the warehouse, whatever the case may be. So that you can kind of think of it in that terms. If for anybody listening that may be in commercial real estate, maybe they're leasing a warehouse, but they have the option to purchase it from the owner. Same thing with residential real estate, where the buyer is leasing the property, but has the option to purchase it. And they're great. I think they're probably the best tool to get into real estate for residential real estate anyway, because the way that we structure them, there's no risk, there's really no capital needed at all, and you're working with nice houses. You don't have to estimate repairs or anything like that. So there's three types of lease options, which we can get into. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. There's three different types, and what we focus on is the lease option assignment, where again, the nice thing about that is we have no capital at risk. We're not going to get a loan. We're not making payments on a house, and there's nobody checks our credit. So it's a very, very easy in as far as getting your foot in the door with residential real estate.
All right, so a couple of doors you opened there for me. So let's talk about this first type, a lease, assignable lease option. So explain, you say an assignable lease option, what are you doing and how do you make your money?
Sure. So So the lease option assignment, or some people call it lease option or flipping lease options. A lot of people know it as wholesaling lease option. The lease option assignment is simply where you are working with the homeowner and setting the terms of the lease option as far as the price. You're offering full price for the property. You're setting the monthly payment, all of that. The owner agrees to the terms you've set forth. They know that you're going to be simply assigning that contract. And once you have everything in place with the owner, you then market that contract to the end buyer, who's going to be typically a family that or a buyer that needs a little bit of time to get financed. Maybe they're self-employed and need another year of tax returns, whatever the case may be. You assign your contract to that end buyer. They pay your assignment fee, typically 4 or 5% of the price, and that's how you get paid. You're now out of the deal, and now the buyer's making the payments directly to the homeowner at that point. So we're with a wholesale deal, as most people know, you negotiate the price as well as you can, tie it up with a contract, and then you assign that contract to the end buyer, who's a cash buyer. With a lease option assignment, you're not negotiating. The owner's getting full price. They know that you're going to be assigning that contract for a fee, and you simply assign that contract, the lease with the option of purchase, to that end buyer, and they're paying you an assignment fee for that contract. So that's how you can get into real estate, where you're not making payments on a house. You don't go get a loan, because you're just simply flipping papers, what you're doing.
All right, so give us some examples. Give us some examples, either your recent deals, maybe it's your student recent deals,
sure,
on property they did, and what kind of assignment fee they were able to fetch on the lease option assignment.
Sure. So I'll actually use a real life example of one that we're actually going through a case study right now to everyone that's on our email list. We like to give them a ton of free information, free education as well. And so we're going through this week, we're going through a case study on a deal that we just closed here. I'm in the Fort Worth area, by the way, and it was here in the Fort Worth area. And so we had a homeowner who had their house on the market for, it was over 60 days or so. I don't know exactly how long, but the house was vacant. It was a nice house, but it was vacant. She'd already moved, and the house had been sitting on the market for over 60 days. Well, what happens is when someone has their house on the market for a certain amount of time, they start becoming more desperate, not desperate enough to do a wholesale, but they start looking for what I call, Lance, plan B. Plan A is someone comes along, sees the house for sale, gives them full offer, full price, cash offer, boom, here you go, and there you go. They close the deal. That's plan A. But when plan A doesn't work out, they start looking for plan B. Well, a lease option is actually a plan B. So in this case, the homeowner received one of our mailings that we do, contacted us, and explained how the lease purchase works, how she'll get full price. She does not pay us a commission, and the end buyer is going to take very good care of the property and even get a home warranty to take care of the property. So it's very hands-off for her. Anyway, so she said, hey, this sounds great. Let's move forward. So I put the numbers together for her. She said, those numbers look great. Put the contracts together. She signed them. Now we're off to the races. Now we're marketing this property that she has, this property that she has as a lease purchase to our buyers, or end clients, through our channels. The end buyer came along, found us online through our marketing methods, had tried to buy a house. His income was good, scores are good, but he'd only been self-employed through a company, he's an independent contractor, for right at 11, coming up on 12 months. Well, he tried to buy a house. The lenders laughed at him because they said, you have to be self-employed for 2 years. He didn't know that. So he found us. He was a great fit for this house. We assigned the contract to him. He paid us $12,000 on that deal, a $12,000 assignment fee. So on this particular house, I saw the house one time. I've never met the seller. Saw the house one time and met the buyer twice and made $12,000. All of that took about an hour's worth of time. That includes the drive time. And so in that case, I signed the contract to this end buyer who was looking to buy a house, just needed some more time to get financed, paid us our $12,000 assignment fee. He's happy. The owner's super happy. She's got a great buyer in there taking great care of the property. The house is no longer empty, and she's going to get full price and not pay a commission to anybody. So what will happen to that end buyer is in a year, after he's been self-employed for 2 years, he'll go ahead and move forward with the traditional financing and get finance on the house. The owner will be cashed out. He's happy, we're happy, everybody's happy. So that's just a real typical lease option assignment.
Great. That's a great example. And so let me recap. Let me make sure, and you correct me if I'm wrong, so everyone listen, recap. So the benefit to the seller, the person that owned the house, is they got out from under payments maybe they were making, mortgage payments, because they're going to get a rental, they're going to get a monthly payment from the person living in it. They have an option. Someone's going to buy the property at their asking price, at full price. It's going to be a little bit down the road, but that's going to be coming, and they paid no commission in the process, and they got debt relief, certainly, and probably some stress relief in the process as well, but they're getting full price. The buyer's standpoint, they're getting into a pretty home with the option to buy it and living in it right away, paying rent payments as they would, but now they've got the option to buy it once they get their situation cleaned up. In this case, 1 more year of tax returns to get them financed for a loan, and at that point, they would take title to the property, they would buy the property, and the seller would get cashed out from the loan, that the bank loan that the buyer would get to buy at full price. Did I say that correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, and you probably did a maybe even cleaner job than I did, but that is exactly correct. Yes. So
go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so the benefits to the seller, because people always say, Lance, well, why would a seller do this, or why would a buyer do this? Right? They don't understand the dynamics here. Well, a seller does this, looks at this as a plan B. When I do a live speaking, I talk about the levels of desperation. Well, typically, there's for sale by owner, for rent by owner, MLS, for lease, and you work your way on down. Typically, if you go online, Lance, and to everybody listening, if you see a house that's for rent by owner, that owner typically fits one or two categories. One, they're either an investor and they're renting their house. They have a portfolio, maybe they have a small portfolio, and they're renting a house. They're an investor. Or two, they are an accidental landlord. What's an accidental landlord? That's somebody that tried to sell their house and they couldn't. And now they're like, well, crud, now what? Well, I guess we got to rent it out. They didn't mean to be a landlord, but now that's kind of what they face. That's where a lease purchase, that's where we come with a lease option and say, wait a minute, renting is way down the road. You can do a lease option, get full price, and instead of a renter, you're going to have someone that's in the process of buying. And so that's why a seller would do this. And a buyer, again, why would a buyer do this? Well, because they're not quite to the point of finance, or maybe they just want to go ahead and get in the house quickly, get the kids in school, get things settled, and then go ahead and get their documents, everything in place for financing. So so that's how it benefits both parties.
Or maybe the buyer needs time to accumulate their down payment. Could that be another reason why they would do the lease option?
It could be. Now, they're typically paying us about 4 to 5% with our assignment fee, which actually goes towards their down payment required by FHA if they're going FHA. But on higher price houses, yes, that's exactly right. They may want to get some things in place if they're having to go, get 5% or 10% down. It gives them more time to save that up. But typically gives them time to get in the house, get settled, get things in place for financing, whether it be additional down payment or documentation, tax returns, that type of thing.
Got it. All right. So you mentioned, let me go back up front. You mentioned there are called 3 types of lease options. So the lease option assignment is number 1. What are number 2 and number 3?
Yes, the lease option assignment is what I really focus on with Leasing to Buy. It's what we teach our students. The other 2 are simply a straight lease option where, let's assume, Lance, you had a house that maybe you had been renting out, or maybe you've been renting it out and you'd be okay selling it if the price is right. Well, instead of renting it and having another tenant in there, you decide to lease purchase or offers a lease option where you're going to get instead of a deposit, you're going to get say 4% down. So maybe you're going to get $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 down, non-refundable, and the tenant buyer you get in there is going to take very good care of the property because in the process of buying it. That's a straight lease option because there's no middleman. It's just you, Lance Edwards, and Bob the buyer. So no middleman. It's a straight lease option. The third type that a lot of people may hear about but didn't know there's a name for it is called a sandwich lease option. A sandwich lease option is where the investor, let's assume Lance Edwards is the investor, he is sandwiched between the seller and the buyer. So in this particular case, a sandwich lease option has 3 points, three profit centers, which I'll talk about. But a sandwich lease option is where Lance comes in as the investor. In this case, he negotiates with the seller to get as low a price as possible, as low a payment as possible, secures that with the seller, and then turns around and markets that property as a lease option on the backside. And of course, on that lease option that he markets, the price is going to be higher, and that monthly payment's going to be higher. So when that buyer comes to Lance, he's paying Lance a higher price than what Lance has contracted for, and he's paying Lance a higher monthly amount than what Lance is paying to the seller. So Lance is sandwiched between the two, the seller and the buyer, and Lance is getting a non-refundable option fee from the buyer. He's getting that cash flow each month, and with that buyer cashes Lance out, Lance has got that equity spread between what he's contracted with the seller and what the buyer's contracted for. That's a sandwich lease option. And so again, there's three profit centers in there. But it's always, I'm very transparent. I always tell people, I'm very risk averse. And so when it comes to real estate, I always say, let's look first of all at the least risk amount, and that is with the lease option assignment, because you're not responsible for making any payments to the owner. But there are those other two, the straight lease option and the sandwich lease option.
Okay, thank you. And so, with the lease option assignment, you're in and out. You don't have any payment obligations. You don't have any repair obligations. You're in and out.
Exactly.
And by the way, on the lease option assignment, in the first example you had, we're up in the Fort Worth, and the seller got a lease option from the buyer. Who's responsible for the repairs in that arrangement? The seller or the tenant buyer?
So the seller is responsible for anything where they'd have to call their insurance company. So let's assume a tornado came and blew the roof off. Well, that's the seller's going to have to call and take their insurance company. But let's assume the dishwasher breaks. Well, that's on the tenant buyer, called the optionee. Now, what we do, Lance, again, we've got this really cookie cutter, so it's very streamlined and very hands off for everybody. Our buyers actually get a home warranty that they pay for, and so it covers everything. So if something were to break, Lance, they don't call the seller; they call the 800 number and pay the $65 service call fee. So the buyer takes care of all that, but we set that up specifically so that it's very hands-off for everybody.
That's smart, John. That's really smart. I like that. So the seller, if insurance is involved to fix it, you got to take care of that. Otherwise, it's home warranty policy with the tenant buyer. They take care of that. That's smart. That's good. That's good.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. So we got. Tell me about right now. So what? We got an active market right now, very active market. So how is this market for lease options, John?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So real quickly, my background, just so everybody knows, and Lance, I don't even know if you know this or not, but my background before I got into real estate is the stock market. I was a day trader and an options trader for 2 years. I was a stay-at-home father and put food on the table by trading stocks and trading options. That's how I got into, guess what? Lease options. So that's just kind of how it happened. So I'm very used to technical analysis, to looking at Japanese candlesticks and moving averages, and that's what I have been trained to do. Well, I've got my finger on the pulse, very in different areas, areas across the U.S., but enough to know that for about the last year and a half, the market has been actually starting to pull back a little bit, and I'm seeing it more and more so. And so, for example, a lot of people, Lance, in single family residential will say, "Oh, it's such a hot market. You stick a sign in the yard, or you put on the MLS, it's gone in 2 days." Well, that's the exception, not the rule. And so I'm seeing the market pull back more and more. So what happens is, particularly in houses here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, anything over, say, about 300,000, those houses are starting to feel the market soften first, because those are the ones where the fewer people that can afford that, that's where they start to feel it first. And how that benefits us, Lance, is we're able to secure these properties under lease option contract far, far quicker and far, far easier now than when the market is super, super hot. And so what happens is now we're in a prime position with lease options, especially anybody listening that's starting off. Guys, this is a prime market for lease options because the market's softening. More and more sellers are looking for that plan B. And lease options are that plan B because they get full price. And so it helps us tremendously. Our business booms as the market softens. And you know, Lance, I've been in the business long enough. I remember 07, 08, 09, when everybody was, you know, jumping out of buildings and stuff. I was doing Leasing To Buy was doing so much business during that time when everybody else was having to close the doors. Lance, I would go for 3, 4, sometimes 5 months with doing zero marketing to sellers, zero, and I still couldn't keep up with it. So now I can't say for sure it's going to be that extreme this time, but the point is that this is a great market for lease options because the market is softening and homeowners are looking more and more for plan B. And so this is a great market for lease options for sure. And again, we've got students all over the US and we're seeing the same thing all over in almost any city you throw a dart at. The market's softening. This is a great tactic, not only for this for beginners especially, but also this time of the market and this time of year, because the first 4 months of the year, buyers come out of the woodwork because they've got they're past the holidays, they got tax returns, they got money to put down. So it's a perfect storm, really.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now I got one more question for you, John. And I'm going to open it up. You up for some questions?
I am definitely. Let's do some fire round. You bet.
All right. Well, before I do that, here's the way it's going to work, guys. So if you're watching live today, then you submit your question to the chat box, and I'm going to relay them to John. Now, if you're watching the recording or listen to this on the podcast, all the different channels we're putting out, you can't submit your question. But if you are watching it live with us here, you can submit. So go ahead and submit your question. Now, here's my final question before I throw some from the field at you here, John. So you and I have operations in Texas. You're up in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm down in my office in Houston. So, and a lot of people, do some Texas listeners right now and saying, wait a minute, I thought lease options were illegal in Texas. Talk about that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, Lance, this here is 2019. The law that they're referencing was passed in 2005, yet here we are 14 years later, and still sometimes I feel like I'm the only person that's ever read the law in 14 years. It's so crazy, Lance. It worked out for me because now I'm the only educator that teaches lease options in Texas. But I've got attorneys that call me, and I should charge them an hourly rate. But they've actually purchased my training materials. They've actually purchased my contracts from me. But Texas does have specific laws about lease options. But part of a lot of the confusion, Lance, comes from rumors. People go. Let me just say this a quick little thing here, guys. For everybody listening, never, ever go to a real estate forum online looking for legal advice. Okay. There's one takeaway from this 30-minute interview. Don't go to real estate forums for legal advice. Okay. You're going to get what you pay for. But real estate forums is a big cause of the confusion and the rumors. People saying, well, I heard this, I heard that, and a lot of things are just made up. The truth is that the lease options are totally viable in Texas. Yes, you have to have certain verbiage in your contracts, and of course we have those. We have that verbiage. You have to have certain disclosures. Okay, we've got those disclosures as well. Now, one thing I will say about Texas, two things I'll say, Lance. Remember, I was talking about a sandwich lease option. You cannot do a sandwich per the law. You cannot do a sandwich lease option in Texas because the seller has to have what's called fee simple title. Now, Lance, you and I have been around long enough. You and I both know what fee simple title is. Fee simple title, guys, is simply how it's considered absolute title. It's the purest form of title. That's how we hold title in Texas. It has absolutely nothing to do with the mortgage. But you cannot do a sandwich lease option because the seller has to have fee simple title. Well, in a sandwich lease option, you as the investor are the seller on the BC transaction. And I know I'm getting way too deep here, but that's how well I don't mean to. But you cannot do a sandwich lease option in Texas. Also, you don't want to do a lease option over 36 months. Outside of that, you have to have certain disclosures. You have to disclose mortgage information, that type of thing. It's actually pretty simple to abide by the law. But a lot of confusion out there, a lot of rumors, people going to real estate groups and meetings and getting misinformation, going to online forums, getting misinformation, and even going to attorneys and getting misinformation. That's why I've trained a number of attorneys. Actually, I've had to teach attorneys what fee simple title is.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I'm not even making the attorneys. It's scary, Lance. But yeah, you can definitely do them in Texas, but you do have to have the right verbiage in the documents to do them. But and that's the great thing about Texas. If you are in Texas, what better market to do lease options, because there's zero competition, right? It's a fair game out there. Yeah.
And to be clear for everyone, the law in Texas, John, you correct me if I'm wrong about this. The law in Texas of lease options is written with regards to to owner-occupied properties. It has nothing to do with commercial. Is that right, John?
Right. Oh, yes. It has nothing to do with commercial at all. Right. Exactly. This has to do with This has to do with residential property. So, so you're exactly right. It has nothing to do with commercial whatsoever.
All right. So, listen, we're going to take some questions here, John. Real quick, give out some. How do people get in contact with you? I know you got some great information. You got your newsletter. How do they get plugged into your world, John?
Yeah, so I'm just going to direct everybody to our website, where we've got a ton of training videos, and we're always adding more and more videos. And it's leaseoptionclasses.com. Again, that's leaseoptionclasses.com. And we've got a ton of videos on there, a lot of free information on there. And one of the things I highly suggest everybody do is, when you go to leaseoptionclasses.com, go ahead and plug your email address into our list there. You'll get some free downloads, such as my customized property lead sheet, as well as a information sheet to give if you're using a VA on how to talk to sellers. It's a great resource. But we give out free information continuously to our list. Like I said, this week we're stepping everybody through a $12,000 deal, so they can see exactly the steps that we did to do a deal. And so leaseoptionclass.com, a ton of training videos, a lot of free information there as well. And they can keep up to date with what we're doing, if I'm going to be speaking somewhere, but also deals that our students are doing, and different advice and tips and tricks that we're doing, because we actually do these deals every day. So I'm not just teaching it. This is what I do.
All right. So everyone go to leaseoptionclasses.com, and I'll be sure to put that on the show notes as well on the podcast. All right, John, we've got some questions coming in here. Let's see. We've got, and here's one from Steve. Hey, Steve. And Steve asks, do you suggest having two agreements, one for the option money and one for the lease?
Yeah, so what Steve is asking is the paperwork. And for a lease option assignment, you're going to have a lease agreement and then a separate option to purchase agreement. And then you're going to have, in my case, a one-page assignment agreement. So it is separate agreements. Ours is actually one long PDF, but it's separate sections. So that, and the reason for that, Lance and Steve, is that if you're going to want the same thing if you're going to do a straight lease option as well, I should say. The reason for that really comes down to, if something were to go horribly wrong and you have to evict somebody, you can just take the lease. You just show up to court with the here in Texas, with the JP, with a lease agreement, and there you go. So you don't want to meddle the two agreements together, and you don't want to make reference to one to the other.
Perfect. So these upcoming questions kind of build upon that. So this next one, John, this is from Kathleen. Hey, Kathleen. And Kathleen's question is, what's the difference between the lease option assignment and a straight lease option?
Yeah, so the straight lease option, Kathleen, would be, for example, Kathleen, if you had a house that you were looking to rent out, it was going to be an investment property, and you're looking to rent it out, but you are okay just selling the property if the price is right, and you market it as a lease option. Well, in that particular case, that's a straight lease option, Kathleen, because there's nobody in the middle. You're not going through, in this case, say, leasing to buy. You're not going through a third party. It's just you and that end tenant buyer. The lease option assignment, Kathleen, is, imagine, Kathleen, you are the investor, and you are tying up a property with a seller, and then you're assigning that contract to the end buyer, Once you assign it, boom, you're out of the equation, and now it's between the buyer and the seller. You're out of it. You're not involved anymore. But on a straight lease option, it's simply between you and that end buyer.
So one has a middle person, one does not.
Exactly.
That's really the simple thing. Okay. All right. Great question. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's see. We got Joanne. Hey, Joanne. Joanne's question for you, John, is the 4 to 5% assignment fee considered part of the down payment?
Yes, a great question. Was that Joanne? Is that right?
Joanne, yes.
Great question. Yeah, and this is very important, guys, is that you've got to have the right documents. Your documents have to your option of purchase has to have the exact specific verbiage on where these funds are going to be applied to. And so with our documents, which, by the way, I've spent over $30,000 on my contracts, but it was certainly well worth it because of how many transactions we do. But you've got to have the right contracts. And Lance, I always tell people, you're only as good as your contracts. I know I'm getting off a tangent here. Guys, don't ever go online and try to download a free contract from someplace. You're not going to be happy.
Ditto. Yeah, ditto on that. Amen.
So on the contracts, ours clearly state that the option fee, the option consideration, which is the assignment fee, will be applied at the time of finance towards funds to close. Now, those funds to close, the lender or the buyer may decide those are going to go towards the FHA required down payment. Sometimes part of it goes towards closing cost. So at the end of the day, it comes down to the time of financing. They will go towards funds to close. But yes, almost every time, Joanne, if I see a settlement statement, a HUD-1, those the closing documents, that option fee, that assignment fee we got paid will show under earnest money, and so it'll go towards the lender's required down payment. But I don't determine that. The lender determines how to distribute those funds, which can be part of the closing cost, part of the down payment. But yes, they do get credit for it, though, definitely. But you've got to have the right verbiage in your contracts.
All right. So I got a question here from Lamont, John, and okay. Lamont's question. Hey, Lamont. Lamont's question is, what if the buyer loses their job or cannot pay or wants to move out?
Okay, so good question. So fortunately, our success rate of getting people financed within 12 months is actually a little over 98% of our buyers get financed within a year. However, let's go down the path of what if something were to happen, such as the buyer lost their job, something unforeseen. Well, at the end of the day, they're still on the hook for the lease agreement, and if they default on that lease agreement, then and again, this is on the lease option assignment. If they were to default on that lease agreement, then at the end of the day, the seller would just pursue them the same way. In that case, the same way they would as a regular tenant. But fortunately, having an issue like that is incredibly rare if you've done your due diligence in screening the tenant. But we've had that, come on, 16 years, almost 17 years, we've had that happen on a rare occasion. And we've had some cases where maybe someone lost their job and within 30 days they were back on their feet, back in another job, and everything was fine, didn't miss a beat. But we've had sometimes where maybe someone was maybe in the military, as an example, because we live close to some bases, and can't help that. And they gave the owner 60 days notice. The owner called us, hey, can you relist this? Is what they determined. Can you relist it? Yep, you bet. Boom, back on the market, and here we go. We do it all over again for them.
All right, so John, I've got that's all the questions. We answered all the questions. I've got now. You spawned two for me. I'm gonna ask you two more questions before we wind down here, because this has been got my brain spinning here, John. And I imagine this is a question some of our listeners may have right now, and because you've made reference to VAs and lead property sheets, etc. So here's my question: is question number one, are you limited to your own backyard in doing this? And question number two, can you automate this business so you can do it on a part-time, or do it and have others doing some of the work for you?
Yeah, both great questions. So let me tackle the first one. Is can you do this? Do you have to do this in your backyard, or are you limited, or can you go out to other areas? Can you do it remotely? Can you do it virtually? I've got to say, so I've done over 650 lease option transactions. For everyone listening, I don't know how many of those houses I saw, but most of them I did not see. I never met the seller. I never saw the house. A lot of those cases, I never even met or talked to the buyer. And so with the way we systematize it, I can do that, the way I structure that. And so you don't have to even have to go see the house. Now, what I do recommend, Lance, and everyone listening, is when you're starting off doing a first, however many, 4 or 5, 6 lease options, I feel like there's a huge benefit to working it in your own backyard. And when I say that within, say, a 30-minute drive radius, go ahead and meet the seller. Go ahead and look at the house. Take the phone calls. Meet the buyer. Why? Because then when you go to train somebody else, you've actually done it. And so you know the process. You know how it's going to work. You know the flow of it. And so just like when you're going to bring, say, a VA on to do any task, it really helps if you have done that task so that you know how to train that VA. Otherwise, you're going to become very frustrated very quickly. So I tell people, if you can, start in your backyard for the first 3 or 4 or 5 or so. And so really get your hands dirty, if you will, get your hands into it to do those first deals. So then you can do them remotely. We've got students, we've got a student right now in Texas that just came on board. He's down in Houston, Lance. He's been with us within our training for not quite 60 days or so. He's locked up his, I think, 12th house under contract, and I think only 4 of them are in Texas. That are in like South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida. Doing a lot in Florida, so you can do these remotely for sure. I just got a house in El Paso. Well, I'm not going to fly to El Paso to look at the house, so you can do them remotely. And the the next question, Lance, can you set this up to systematize it? Absolutely, it's certainly easy to do this, where you can do it with using VAs to do the marketing for you. You can even have them field the calls for you. So you can easily set this up. But I think, in my opinion, it's one of the easier methods in single family anyway to do, to set up the structures and do remotely, just because, again, you don't have to see the house. Why? You don't have to guess the repairs in the house. You don't have to walk around, see what's broken, see what works, see what doesn't. So I think it's one of the easier methods to do remotely, or virtually, as people like to say.
Well, that's excellent, John. And so everyone, there's a great way. If you're new to real estate, this is a great way to get started. Or even if you're doing real estate, another profit center for it, another way to monetize these leads you've got coming in. And now remember, the way you get plugged into John, leaseoptionclasses.com, leaseoptionclasses.com. I'm going to put that on the show notes. And you'll find that at greenlightreinvesting.com, greenlightreinvesting.com. So those of you listening to the recording on the different channels which we put this out, always get the archives. Greenlightreinvesting.com. And then for John, it's leaseoptionclasses.com. John, it's been fantastic. I got a final question. You've been doing this, you said almost, how long have you been doing this? Almost 15 years? That was 2005?
Almost 17. I've been doing it since 03.
03. Okay, you and I started at the same time then. That's a long time.
I was going to say, you were either just starting or you were still an engineer or something. I don't remember. In 03, weren't you?
No, 2003. My first one was 2003. I remember my first closing. And so all these, long time, you old man. So what final wisdom or words of advice do you have for our listeners?
I would say a few things here. I would say I wrote a chapter for a book that for you actually called "The Riches in the Niches." My chapter, guys, find your niche and stick with it. It's so easy nowadays to be chasing the shiny object. And here's the thing, guys: don't beat yourself up because you want to chase a shiny object. Just beat yourself up if you do. Here's the thing, guys. If you're on this call, you have an entrepreneur brain, just like Lance does, just like I do, and we are wired to kind of be fascinated by the next shiny object. That's just the way we are. It's okay to be wired that way. Just know to rein it in and focus on that niche, whether it be Lance with commercial and apartments, and me, it's lease options. Find the riches in it, find that niche and really hammer on that niche. before you try to do anything else. Like I said before, be careful what you read online. Most of it's just made up by somebody who's never done a deal, and you're only as good as your contracts. So how's that, Lance?
That's excellent. I agree with that. Focus. And avoid the idea avalanche, which we are all prone to. 1,000 great ideas a day. Listen, pick one and run with it. So, hey, John, thank you so much. I really want to thank you. You've been very, very insightful, and you got my brain opened up here to the possibility of lease options. And thank you for taking the questions and being part of Greenlight REI. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lance.
All right, everyone. So remember, check it out. LeaseOptionClasses.com. Go see that free training. Get you plugged into John Jackson's system there. He's one of the guys doing it a long time. Obviously, he's one of the good guys out there doing real estate deals. So this is Lance Edwards wrapping up this episode of Greenlight REI. Until the next time, make your lifestyle a successful real estate one. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
You've been listening to The Expert with Lance Edwards. Let us now blatantly and shamelessly bribe you toward creating your own real estate lifestyle by offering you a whole bunch of free stuff. Go to greenlightreinvesting.com and get you some free stuff and this session's show notes.